Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Mercola. I'm here today with Dr. Rudy Merck, and we're really excited to have him because he is really an industry expert in a very important area, which is omega-3 fats. And he's got a lifelong of experience. He's got specific training. He's in academics. He's working with the National Institutes of Health. He's actually an insider with the drug industry and has actually been responsible for the formulation of many different drugs. And he's taken his expertise and been able to apply it to what his true passion is. And he is born and raised in Germany, but most of his training is in the United States. And his passion is health and getting people healthy. And he's got he's got an extraordinary personal history. And I'm sure we'll get into how he applies his knowledge to his own personal choices of foods. And you're going to learn a lot just from that information. So why don't you highlight some of your specific academic credentials and industry affiliations so that our listeners know that you really truly are a highly qualified industry expert that can really share some useful insights about this really important topic.
Well, thank you, Joe. My undergraduate work was in biology with a concentration on botany, and of course associated with that is a keen interest in plant extracts and plant products, medicinals made from plants. In graduate school, I obtained a degree in physical organic chemistry, and while at Ohio State University, I also taught pre-medical organic chemistry, and I also taught at Ohio Wesleyan University. With that background, I then went into the industry, and mainly the pharmaceutical industry, spent 25 years in that industry, developed a lot of drugs. I was associated with the development of 17 drugs from discovery all the way through manufacturing. And I've always had a passion for both pharmaceuticals and natural products and herbal products, because in my family history and my background, those things have always played a very important role, and I apply them to myself. In some cases, traditional drugs are very important. Mm-hmm. In other cases, herbal products complementary with drugs, and on a standalone basis are also very important.
Well, I find it particularly interesting in the fact that certain drugs can be useful at times, and especially as tools to help us make a transition to a natural lifestyle. And one thing, I mean, you can fault the drug industry for a lot of problems and really contributions to major challenges in the health as we know it today. But one thing you cannot fault them for is that they are really experts and pioneers in developing these processes and these quality assurance levels that really have come up with some extraordinary chemicals that really have a significant influence on biology. So it's just wonderful to have someone with this expertise apply it and put on his good white hat to really do good, and rather than necessarily generate profits for an industry that is really more concerned about their bottom line than the health of the people that they're serving. So we're just delighted to have you here.
Thanks.
So there's a lot of confusion about fish. And first let me preface in saying that fish oil is really what started this whole market, and all of the research, and even to this day, I would say it's fair to estimate that over 99% of the studies, the documentation of the benefits of animal-based omega-3 fats, DHA and EPA, are based on fish.
Well, first of all, fish oils are very high in EPA and DHA, and typically made from menhaden, sardines, herring, things that are generally not eaten in the normal consumption. Let's start off by saying that EPA and DHA is good for you.
Mm-hmm. Now, we think we've pretty much established it. I mean, it's not a leap. I mean, even that's something so well documented, because there's most all nutritional claims are denied by the FDA, but one of the few ones that are is the claim of EPA and DHA for the benefit of cardiovascular disease. I mean, that's so accepted. Even the FDA agrees to that one.
Right, and there are probably more benefits than that are still not allowed, but they will be coming in the next few years as more research is done. But if we go out there and we visited a fish oil factory, basically you know where it is before you get there. Okay, because these factories, they stink of high heaven. And you go there, and there's very large processing vats where they extract fish oil, and this is done several ways. One is by just simply squeezing the fish In some cases with cod liver oil, they actually remove the livers from the cod and then remove the oil from those by classical mechanical techniques. In some cases, to get the last few ounces of oil out of the fish, they use solvents, or they use fish oil as a solvent by taking not old fish oil, but fish oil that's already been processed, using it as an extraction method to get more fish oil out. Every time a fish oil is subjected to contact with oxygen, it starts going rancid, it starts oxidizing. Now, the other factor that has to be considered right up front, and that is the metal content of the fish. The further down the food chain and the shorter the lifespan of the fish, the less metal it's going to have in it. So, for instance, a salmon is going to have less metal in it than a grandfather tuna. Tuna have a lot more mercury and other heavy metals in them because they're older fish. They accumulate these things in their body. And accumulation of these in our own bodies causes all kinds of things like autoimmune diseases.
Like mercury. So your contention is that one of the concerns, and it's not really widely recognized of many of these fish oil supplements, is there's going to be relatively large amounts of metals in there. Not necessarily heavy metal toxins like mercury, which are typically screened for in higher quality brands at least. But these other ones are probably not identified.
Right, and well, first of all, when you're buying a omega-3 source, you shouldn't be buying metals. Okay, so all the reputable fish oil companies, the big boys in the industry, have gone to the point of refining the fish oil and removing as many of the metals as they can. When you buy fish oil, always pay the highest possible price. I mean, usually a price in this case is an indicator of a good indicator of quality. A very cheap fish oil is not going to
be careful. Avoid like the plague.
Right, right. And don't ever buy it in a clear plastic bottle, in giant bottles like you see at some of these mall type stores. Don't ever do that.
Warehouse,
because the light goes right through there. It's UV damage, it's rancidity, and also if you have a big bottle of it, you better keep it in a refrigerator because it's going to go. As far as the fish oils we've seen out there, it's a very wide gamut of quality and stability and rancidity. I would say 50% of them are rancid.
50% of them.
50%.
Rancid to the level where they're unacceptable to be used by humans, and more than likely taking them will actually cause more damage than good.
Well, if you put that strict thing on it, I would say 25%.
25%.
I think that there is some mislabeling going on, that the expiration date put on there is arbitrary, and that the actual shelf life is less. And I think, you know, I would bet my reputation on that. That is the case, that there's fish oil that's mislabeled as far as expiration date. And we have tested these, and we have found very wide range of rancidity, even in the same brand. There'll be some of it that...
And it's maybe an artifact of the processing of the oils and the manufacturing.
Or where it's stored. If you take a fish oil and you put it in a warehouse in Dallas, Texas for 4 months...
It'd be different than storing it in Maine in the winter.
Right, right. There's a big difference. And so, you know, the ones that have a high turnover are going to have less rancidity. And then depends on how they're stored in stores and what kind of bottles they're in. Also, a lot of fish oil is not in PET bottles or not in glass bottles. Glass I don't recommend because of environmental reasons. It takes 8 times more energy to ship a glass bottle than it takes to ship a plastic bottle.
And there's a breakage issue, too.
A breakage issue, and safety issue, and everything else. But glass, one thing great about glass is oxygen doesn't go through it. PET is almost as good as glass as far as oxygen barrier, and of course it's a lot lighter. I believe very strongly that you do have some excellent fish oil being made. It's very expensive. Best if you're going to buy that, you should buy it from a distributor that'll ship it to you directly. You don't want to buy it off the grocery shelves. You don't know how long it's been.
So those are what I'd like you to expand on are these principles you're starting to now. The principles that a typical consumer can use to identify high quality fish oil, because they're not going to have a ransom method they can use it to check it. So basically, you never want to buy high volume,
Right.
large containers, small.
Clear containers, avoid.
Like the plague, because they're just, the sunlight is going to let the UV through and it will
Fluorescent
oxidize.
lights.
Fluorescent lights, okay.
Fluorescent lights is as bad as sunlight.
Interesting. That will oxidize the oils.
That's right.
So-
Because it's got a lot of UV in it.
Okay. All right. So are there any other guidelines?
If you were going to buy tomato plants, okay, wouldn't you want to have them shipped, go to the nursery and get it? Well, you can't go to the harbor and get a fish and squeeze the oil out of it. But if you were to buy it in a store, you would either have it shipped to you, or you would have it sitting in a glass jar. I mean, if it was a tomato plant, you would have it shipped to you overnight, right? The same thing with fish oil supplements. If you're going to use them, small bottles and have it shipped to you overnight, and with a company that's got a high turnover. And then when you get it, put it in a refrigerator.
But the big caution, I think, that really casts concern on the whole industry, because the bulk, well over 90%, maybe 95% more of the people who've been convinced of the data, that believe animal-based omega-3s, DHA and EPA are useful and are taking them as a supplement to protect themselves, prevent disease, are using fish oils.
Yes.
But a huge percentage, at least 25% from your experience, and another 25% are close to that level, are damaged products, and you really want to avoid them. So it's really a crapshoot. I mean, it's a toss of the coin as to which one you're going to get, if it's good or bad.
I talked to a fairly well-known physician a little while back, and I talked to him about the issue of metals and even refined fish oils. You have some PCBs, you have some metal, and I asked him, what's the cost-benefit ratio of this? He goes, well, all things being equal, if you couldn't get anything that was better, take fish oil and take the metals and contaminants, because net, you're healthier than if you didn't take any.
One of the other elements that might be present in fish oil, I was surprised when you told me, it would be some saturated fat, actually in surprisingly large concentration. So can you comment on that and explain how that wound up in there and what's going on with the saturated fat in fish oil?
Yeah, that's a very good question. A few years ago, there was a big controversy in England where people were buying fish oil and then reselling it, but adding, or as they say in the illegal area, they were cutting it with a cheaper oil. Fish oil is a relatively inexpensive oil anyway, but then people were adding what I call, where I come from, we call it pig fat. You know it more as lard to fish oil. Now, it's important to understand that most fish oil already has some saturated fat. 20 to 35% is a saturated fat naturally occurring in the fish, and through processing you really can't separate it out. There is some processing you could use, like freezing or something that could winterizing.
And this is one of the reasons why when you put fish oil in the refrigerator, it turns more towards a solid.
Right. And some of the fatty acids that are in there also will solidify at that temperature if they're triglycerides, for instance. But fish oil definitely contains saturated fat. And there have been cases, and these are published cases that were well known, of people adding lard to fish oil in order to extend it and to get a better price for their oil. So that's something to look out for. Now, if you look at the label of fish oil, you can usually tell if it's got any added fats to it by looking at the ratio of total weight and EPA DHA.